Welcome to another edition of the Fantasy Basketball Weekly Planner. I am Amber Wilson, and joining me is senior fantasy writer Jamey Eisenberg. And Jamey, let's start out talking about the Spurs, who normally are such a hot team. They're normally on top of the Western Conference. This season, not even on top of their division. And this is the time where they normally really start getting going during their rodeo trip. This
Ride 'em
season,
Cowboy.
I know, ride 'em Cowboy, right? This season, maybe not so much.
Not so much. You know, Amber, they're dealing with some injuries right now, most notably to Tony Parker. You know, Manu Ginobili's missed some time with a finger injury. Tim Duncan missed some time earlier this year with an ankle injury. But Tony Parker could be out about 3 weeks now with bone spurs, which is sort of ironic that he plays for the Spurs. But bone spurs in his left heel. They're going to bring in potentially Damon Stoudemire. They're in some talks about bringing in the former guard for the Memphis Grizzlies, who was recently bought out of his contract. So if they bring in Stoudemire, they'll stabilize some things a little bit. But from a fantasy perspective, you're going to sit Tony Parker for this week, for the next couple of weeks. He may not be back for the All-Star until after the All-Star break. So that's going to mean good things for Manu Ginobili and Tim Duncan. Some of the other guys will mix in as well. Again, guys like Stoudemire if he's brought on, Jacques Vaughn who's going to replace Parker, even guys like Michael Finley and Brent Barry. But for the meantime, you know, you're going to count on Ginobili and Duncan to really pick up some of the slack that the Spurs will be needing to try and get back on top of the Western Conference.
Right, which is exactly why Manu Ginobili is one of your starting guards this week. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. Starting there, we also have Mike Bibby and Jason Terry. Jason Terry is a guy who we start and sit depending on the matchups. Why do you have him starting this week?
Well, you know, Amber, he's typically one of those guys that sort of falls into he gets caught up in the mix in Dallas a little bit because they have so many offensive weapons with guys like Dirk Nowitzki and Josh Howard, Jerry Stackhouse when he's healthy. But they're missing Stackhouse right now with a hamstring injury. But most notably for Terry is that Devin Harris, the starting point guard, is out 2 to 3 weeks with an ankle injury. So he's going to be out definitely this coming week. Terry's got 4 games. I think he's going to be in line for some big production just because he's that type of player. You know, a little bit down in his scoring this year, and his assists are down because he's coming off the bench, really playing more of a 2-guard situation. But without Harris, he's going to be asked to handle the ball a little bit more, and that should really help his fantasy production.
All right, let's move on and take a look at the sitting guards this week. And you have a couple guys on this list that are banged up in Red and Tinsley, but Randy Foye, I'm surprised he's on this list, Jamey.
Yeah, that's right, Amber. It is a little bit of a surprise because he just recently came back after missing the entire season with a knee injury. So fantasy owners got to be really excited that you finally could put him in your lineup. But I think you want to hold off just a little bit just because he's going to have his minutes limited for the next couple of games until he gets his feet wet. He's only played 18 minutes in his first game, 21 minutes in his second game, 18 total points. So he may get some decent production unless you really don't have any other options just because of some of the injuries to guys like Red and Tinsley. You may want to throw in Randy Foye in your lineup. But I think if you're looking at it to be safe, let him get his feet wet, let him get back in the starting lineup and really prove himself for the Timberwolves before you use him as a fantasy starter.
All right, let's move on to our starting forwards. And you have Josh Howard on this list. He's going to pick things up with Harris out, of course. And then you also have Drew Gooden. We'll talk about him when we talk about centers in a sec. But let's talk about Kevin Durant. Here's a freshman phenom that I, heard a little bit about.
You know, when you're looking at Kevin Durant, he has been sort of shaky the last few weeks just because his shooting percentage is down. A guy that's 6'9", not really getting to the boards as much as you would like to see, not really handling the ball, passing the ball wise. From a guy who handles the ball so much that you would like to see his assists up. So he's only about 19.5 points. Again, his shooting percentage is around 40% and averaging, I think it was 2.2 assists per game. But he came out of the game last week against San Antonio with a really nice line, 26 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. These are the kind of things you want to see from Durant, and I think you'll get that going forward, especially this week because he has 2 really good matchups of the 3 games that he plays against Sacramento and Phoenix. So I think the chance for him to put up some big production as he gets a little bit closer to that rookie-sophomore game. You mentioned, a rookie phenom. So he's going to really want to put on a show in that game. So I think heading into that game, get a little bit of a break with the All-Star break, and then you'll see a good second half for him. But this week, you definitely want to start him.
All right, let's move on to our sit-fors this weekend. You have Grant Hill on this list. I'm kind of surprised there's another guy that I'm surprised you have because he's coming back.
Yes, that's
he's
right.
He's still a sit.
He is coming back. He had the back injury following the appendectomy, which really limited his game a little bit. I think he struggled, as he mentioned, trying to overcompensate for the appendectomy with the back injuries. That's how that sort of crept up. But the Suns, this time, they're going to take him a little bit slowly, limit some of his minutes, continue maybe to keep him on the bench. His first game back was off the bench with Boris Diaw still starting. So I think as long as Grant Hill is coming off the bench and his minutes are going to be limited, you're going to want to sort of be concerned about his fantasy production. So I think, again, the safer option when you look at situations like this, keep him reserved, and hopefully eventually he gets back on the court and put up the type of production that we know from Grant Hill, which is almost a triple-double threat when he's on his game.
All right, let's move on to our starting big men this week. And we have Bren Wallace, Mehmet Okur, Zydrunas Ilgauskas, and let's go ahead and talk about Big Z because we teased them a little bit about Drew Gooden.
That's right. The thing with Drew Gooden and with Big Z, with Zydrunas Ilgauskas, Anderson Varejao, the backup forward, who's a really phenomenal player for the Cavaliers, is going to miss 3 to 4 weeks with an ankle injury. So without the floppy-haired Brazilian running around and sort of stealing some of their rebounds and their points, you'll see Gooden and Zydrunas sort of go back to the production that they had in December when they were both big double-double threats. So they both have 4 games this week. I think the production could be very high. A little bit shaky because, as we know, LeBron James is going to dominate that offense. But if you're looking for a number 2 center or a number 3 or number 4 forward in Drew Gooden, I think both those guys can be started for you this week.
All right, let's look at our 3 centers this week. And on this list, you have Chris Webber. And I'm a little bit surprised you have Chris Webber.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised. But the safe option, again, with guys that are coming, from missing the entire season with Chris Webber, just signing in Golden State, as we talked about in our previous video, he's going to affect Andres Biedrins. But I think it's going to take Webber some time to get into condition to sort of play in that up-tempo style for Golden State, plus the fact that they only have 2 games this week. So his debut is expected to come February 7th against Chicago, nationally televised game for the Warriors. But I think, again, the safe route is let Webber sort of work his way back into the mix. You'll eventually be able to use him as a number 2 fantasy center, a number 3 or 4 fantasy forward. But for now, I think the safe bet, again, let him play himself into shape, and then you can eventually start to use him.
Patience, which is very difficult to have in fantasy hoops.
That's
but we'll
right.
try. All right, Jamie, thanks for all of your advice this week.
You got it.
Keep your mouths right here at CBSSports.com for everything you need to know in the world of sports. If you missed anything for today, stop, refresh, get rewatch. For Jamey Eisenberg, I'm Amber Wilson. Good luck with your lineups, guys.